So the purpose of the report tonight is to seek Council's endorsement of the Boroondara Reconciliation Strategy 2022 to 26, which is Attachment 1, and to present the responses to the community submissions received during the public exhibition period of the strategy, which is Attachment 2. The report also thanks the 14 community members and groups who submitted their valuable feedback and acknowledges the support and contribution from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stakeholders. The strategy formalises Council's 4-year vision and commitment to reconciliation in the municipality. It sets out a clear roadmap and framework for implementing reconciliation initiatives in the community in collaboration with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, service providers, community organisations and the broader community. The strategy was developed based on background research and extensive community consultation with key stakeholders from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sector, service providers, community organisations and the broader community during July and August 2021. The consultation sessions enable Council to hear directly about the aspirations for reconciliation locally and opportunities for action and collaboration with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander sectors and people. The information gathered and the background research informed the development of the strategy's vision, themes, strategic objectives, focus areas for action and the implementation plan. The draft strategy was placed on public exhibition from the 16th of November through to the 14th of December. Opportunities to comment on the draft strategy were promoted through various channels with a particular focus on seeking the views of key local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stakeholders and services. Council thanks the 14 submitters who responded and provided feedback on the draft strategy. Of the 14 submitters, 2 identified themselves as Aboriginal. The feedback has been reviewed and suggested changes have been incorporated into the strategy, which is Attachment 1. Based on the submissions received and the wording of some of the actions in the strategy have been changed and are contained in the body of the report. An additional paragraph was also added at the beginning of the strategy to reflect on what reconciliation is, and a translation of the acknowledgement will be included in the design document. The Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation did not make a formal written submission. However, they provided verbal support of the strategy at monthly meetings and at the December meeting of the Boroondara Reconciliation Advisory Committee. Attachment 2 includes details of all the submissions received and the responses to the feedback, including where changes have been suggested in the strategy in response to that feedback. Following adoption, the strategy will be available on Council's website from tomorrow, Tuesday the 29th of March, and it will be formally launched during Reconciliation Week, which is the 27th of May to the 3rd of June. So the recommendations before you tonight are up on the screen, and they are that Council resolve to adopt the Boroondara Reconciliation Strategy 2022 to 26 as annexed in Attachment 1. Secondly, to acknowledge the support and contribution from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation and other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander key stakeholders in the development of the strategy. And 3, to thank the 14 community members and groups for their submission. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms Brown. Are there any questions for officers? Councillor Biggar?
No questions right now, but I would just like to foreshadow a motion when the time's right. Thank you.
Thank you, I'll note that. Councillor Franco, you have a question?
Yes. I have a few questions, if that's okay, Chair. Firstly, in relation to the submissions, I know that a number of persons and groups, including myself, raised the issue of not just naming new sites, places and facilities, but also the potential renaming of existing sites and places. Can you explain, and I appreciate that one of my colleagues may seek to address this with a motion, but I wonder if you could explain how that's incorporated in the current report.
So So through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we do have an action in the plan to name spaces, and it has identified new spaces at this stage.
Would it benefit from greater clarity in a separate motion?
That's a matter for councillors.
Okay. Some additional questions, if that's okay, Mayor?
Yes, sorry.
A couple of sites that have been raised in relation to naming are not mentioned in the report at all, and I note, for example, the Freeway Golf Course, which is currently under construction, and I'm not sure if it's formally named the Freeway Golf Course or informally named the Freeway Golf Course, but that doesn't have any mention in the report. I'm wondering if that can be considered or is being considered or might be considered through the process outlined in the report. And I also raise that in respect of the naming of Gardner Ward, which has come up in discussions, and the potential consideration of its renaming under the provisions in the proposed policy.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so my understanding is that Freeway Golf Course is not an official name and so would be captured as the action is currently worded under new names, but Gardner Ward is an existing name, is my understanding, and so currently we would have to look at expanding the action from the focus on new places and spaces.
Okay. And the reason for not including it in the report is because?
We didn't actually list or note any particular places that we are targeting on. The point of the action is to consider a naming process and protocol, and that's what it's intended to do.
Okay. One other issue that came up in the consultation period is the former corroboree tree, which lived outside our civic centre, out nearby to this town hall. I know it's got a write-up on the council website. It's also, I know, former Mayor Neville Lee has raised in discussions his recollections of the tree. That was raised in submissions, but it's not mentioned in the report. Is that being addressed or considered in any way?
So in relation to the corroboree tree, in the strategy, what we've done is list places that currently are, that people can visit. We believe that the action in relation to the corroboree tree can be addressed under Action 20 in the plan, which is to investigate a range of sites. And we currently have, in fact, provided information to the Wurundjeri on the corroboree tree, and we're seeking their advice. So that action's in process now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Any other questions before I go back to Councillor Biggar for her motion? I can't see any other lights on, so Councillor Biggar, you foreshadowed a motion.
I did. I'd like to foreshadow a slightly amended motion. There it is. Thank you to the officers for putting that up for me. So it really is to address, well, the second point, point B, it does address the issue that, do you want me to speak to it now or wait?
Maybe
Get
we'll
a seconder.
just pause and let people read it, and then we'll seek a seconder. Has everyone had time to read and absorb? Thank you. So can I see if anyone is happy to second that motion up on the screen? Councillor Thompson?
Happy to second that motion.
To assist Councillor Biggar and Councillor Thompson, is anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. We do have some opposed. So I'll return to Councillor Biggar to speak to your motion, please.
Thank you. I'll speak broadly to the motion and then specific to the specifics. And I guess the first thing I want to say is that I think this is an important day for Boroondara, and as it really formalises our commitment as a community to reconciliation. This is not something that is brand new, but it is something that formal commitment is really important. And I think, as the report notes, this is not something that is achieved overnight. I think it happens as trust and respect are built. So I want to firstly really thank the officers for their work on this, because their work with the Wurundjeri people, not just in the last 12 months, but over years, has been really foundational for this piece of work. So in terms of the amendments, just to speak to the amendments, as Councillor Franco mentioned with point B, this is really just an opportunity to give us the option of considering all kinds of places that might be appropriate, not only new places where there might be a consideration of a renaming. This is not a vote about renaming places. It's not about specific locations. It's about opening that as an option rather than having it closed off. And I would see that for some of us, this was something that, well, for me personally, it was something that probably should have come up earlier, and so and didn't, and so I apologize for that. In terms of point A, this really came up in conversations. So we, as the officers noted, we have regular meetings through the Reconciliation Advisory Committee with the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung elders and those working in the community. And basically, at a meeting that we had with them today, it was clear that they had a desire for us to potentially develop a statement of commitment, just a very simple statement of commitment. I think, in effect, our policy is a policy of commitment, but it is, and no buts actually, it is a policy of commitment, and I think that what's very important is that commitment is shown through our work with them and our collaboration with them. And so for me, this small change in point A relates to a request of theirs to say, could we just ensure that we're phrasing that in a way that gives them confidence and comfort? And so for that reason, I would ask my fellow councillors to consider this amended version and support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bigger. Councillor Thompson is the second. Would you like to?
Reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park, you have your light on.
Thank you. I think it's unfortunate that this amended motion is being moved, because my sense is that had the recommendation that was put forward by officers been moved, it would have garnered unanimous support, which would have been a much better approach. Councillors were, or most councillors were first given wind of this proposed change in direction about an hour before the council meeting, and that's just not sufficient given the nature of the change. I'd be very keen to hear officer advice about how that would be interpreted and what the ramifications will be. And by moving it here in this situation, councillors are simply denied that opportunity. On that basis, I can't support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Sinfield, you have your light on.
Thank you, I do. Without wanting to draw officers into debate, as Councillor Park has remarked, I would be keen to receive officer advice as to the ramifications of this. I also first learnt of this at 5:17 p.m. tonight and haven't had the opportunity to consider any perhaps unintended consequences. Should this motion fail, I will happily support the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. I might seek some brief advice.
I'm happy to wait while the advice is given.
Through you, Madam Mayor, in relation to the statement of commitment to reconciliation, officers did actually put forward a beginning paragraph which is on page 3 of the strategy, and it is titled About Reconciliation, and those words we've been comfortable with them in the past. that could potentially be changed to statement of commitment if councillors were of a mind to do that. But it does very much focus the importance of Boroondara as a council working with the Wurundjeri Wurrung as well as local Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island organisations. So an officer recommendation would be to change what's already there in the first part. So rather than about reconciliation, that we made that a statement of commitment.
So on that basis, would we need to change point A, or that would be consistent with how point A reads on this motion?
No, we would need to change the motion to change the beginning title of about reconciliation to a statement of commitment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Thank you for that advice, but I was waiting to hear officers' advice perhaps on item B, on 1B.
Thank you.
Again, thank you through the Mayor. In terms of the actual process that we would go to develop an internal naming policy and procedure, officers have not turned their mind to what would be involved in relation to public consultation to change existing titles to new, and what would be the thought or impact. So at this point, we don't have any consultation back from the community as to whether that would be something that the community would support. We have only consulted on the basis of new facilities or places being named.
Thank you very much. Did that answer your question, or you have another one, Councillor Watson?
Well, no, I was just going to speak to the motion now that I've heard officers' advice as requested by Councillor Sinfield. Based on our officers' advice in regards to 1A, if the mover of the motion agreed to alter that portion of the motion as recommended by officers, I could support 1A. 1B, I absolutely cannot support, and I echo the concerns raised by Councillor Park, where we have major amendments to a really important document landing in our inbox with 1 hour's notice to reflect and consider what those changes might be. So I think it is terribly unfair to councillors who, well, there may have been councillors who were avidly discussing it, but I certainly was unaware of those discussions and had absolutely no time to think deeply about this. But the thoughts that I did have about 1B really did line up with officer advice, and the sorts of things that ran through my mind were community consultation, what might that look like? I think that 1B is ill-considered. It needs to be removed, in my view, and we should be receiving an officer's report about the implications where councillors have time to be properly briefed and consider both the intended and the unintended consequences. So it is with a great deal of concern for the process that we've gone through that I am now put in a position where I cannot support what is a good piece of work done on behalf of the City of Boroondara called the Reconciliation Strategy because of this amendment here tonight. If 1A was altered, I would support that, but I absolutely cannot support B and would recommend that that be removed, and that would garner my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Franco.
Thank you. I think it's a wonderful piece of work that we've got before us today, and I'm delighted that the policy is here before us and the quality and quantity of the work that's gone into it. Fabulous work. In relation to the amendment, I very much, in relation to the motion before us that Councillor Biggar has presented, I am very supportive I'd make the point that there's nothing ambiguous about 1B, about the consequences. The consequences are crystal clear. If we don't pass 1B, it means we will only have a policy developed which only allows us to consider the inclusion of Wurundjeri Woiwurrung language and or acknowledging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and people in the naming of new places and spaces. By removing it, the implication is absolutely crystal clear. We're prepared as a council to consider the renaming or the dual naming or whatever it might be of existing places. That doesn't mean that we are going to go out with specific sites right now and we haven't even developed the policy, but it just means we can and we're open-minded, as opposed to being closed-minded and saying the existing names are locked in. That's what's at stake here. That's what this debate is about. And I encourage all councillors to think open-mindedly. It doesn't mean that we're passing a resolution on any particular place or space. In relation to A, I think there's a bit of confusion. What is stated there is that we develop a statement of commitment and reconciliation. That's perfectly reasonable. That's not saying what that statement contains. It's not about amending a paragraph in the current report. It's about developing that and coming back and working with key stakeholders in relation to that. And I'm very much supportive of that. And finally, I just want to mention that I'm pleased to hear that in relation to the former corroboree tree, that's being explored. And I know that's not part of this report before us, but I welcome that work by officers, and I thank you for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor
Chair, I'd
Hall.
like to propose an amendment.
Yes, what is your amendment?
My amendment is to modify paragraph 1 by deleting entirely everything after B and making in the second line the word amendments singular, deleting the A, at the beginning. Yep. And I just will need some advice from officers in respect of the advice that was given by the director. I seek to have a form of words that puts into effect the director's advice.
That the current title about reconciliation is amended to read Statement of Commitment to Reconciliation.
We'll pause for a moment while we...
Yeah.
Councillor Park, that's what you had in mind?
Yes, except that the A goes and that, so it'll just read with the following amendments.
Oh, one amendment, remove the S?
Yeah. however that's best tidied up. And I'll need some further officer advice. What I'd like to then do is insert a new paragraph 3 and renumber the existing paragraph 3 as paragraph 4. And I'd seek assistance with some wording that requires officers to engage in public consultation in respect of the renaming of existing sites. So to address for the future the question of, so we undertake consultation, and then this whole question that's the substantive motion, we can consider with the benefit of public consultation.
Officers to engage in public consultation to address any future renaming of existing sites.
Yes, perhaps putting a time frame on that so that it comes back by way of a report, I don't know, 3 months or whatever officers recommend as appropriate.
Councillor Park, do you want to clarify the consultation, or you're happy to leave it up to the officers' discretion?
I think maybe the officers could advise us tonight what that period might be. But if not, I've got no problem with the motion being open-ended. But
and the form of the consultation, you're happy to leave that up to?
I think that's best left with officers.
Thank you.
Sorry, now how's that from again? To address any...
Do we need a brief adjournment, or is everyone happy to? I think we're fairly close.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. To obtain.
In your hands, Chair. Happy to move one if you think it's appropriate.
Hard to judge how long it will be. Won't be long, I'm told.
Thanks.
Councillor Park.
Yes, I'm happy to move that as my motion, Chair.
Can I see if there's a seconder for Councillor Park's motion? Councillor Watson? you're happy to second?
Happy to second, yep.
Is anyone opposed to that motion? Thank you. So there's some opposition. Councillor Park, would you like to
I would,
speak to
thank
your
you.
motion?
There's some opposition as an understatement, but anyway. I think that's very unfortunate because, in fact, this achieves exactly what Councillor Biggar's motion sought to achieve, but, importantly, it introduces an element of public consultation. And in the life of this council, so often I hear, particularly the newly elected councillors, talking about the need for open, accountable, transparent processes. Well, the meeting that occurred today that's prompted the amended motion that was put by Councillor Biggar wasn't an open meeting, it wasn't a public meeting, it wasn't transparent. It was a meeting of an advisory committee, and there's nothing untoward about that. But the fact of the matter is that this is a significant change in direction, and the public, our residents, the people whom we represent, the totality of the people whom we represent, might be very supportive of this approach, but they ought to be consulted. And there's no good reason to vote against this motion. Absolutely none. This strategy has been a long time in the making. So another 4 months to enhance the policy, the strategy, surely isn't a problem. Why would you vote against that? See, there's no bloody-mindedness in this motion because it actually embraces every single element that was sought to be achieved. So there's no good reason to vote against this. If you were inclined to vote for the previous motion, then you should have no difficulty with this motion. And importantly, this is a motion that should garner unanimous support, and that sends a very clear and important message to the entire community. So I'd ask you to rethink your position and consider supporting the motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Park. Councillor Watson, as the seconder, would you like to speak now?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Park pretty well summed it up, and one of the objections I've had, which I've articulated before about the process and about feeling ambushed about these amendments, is that word internal, and people in our community have a right to be able to voice their opinion, especially about something as significant as a name, because people are very invested in them, and many of us on the previous council have been involved in naming things and understand the lengthy process that you go through, and the work that goes into it, and sometimes the emotional investment that comes with it from the community. So I would urge my fellow councillors to support this motion. I agree with Councillor Park. It achieves absolutely everything that the previous motion did, and it involves our community, and it reflects a level of honesty and transparency about the naming process, which is very, very important. So I urge my fellow councillors to support this amendment, and would predict that we'd be able to, as a council, fully support the good work that the officers have done for the reconciliation strategy. But for this amendment, we would have, I believe, all our hands in the air. So I will leave my comments there and urge you to support this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Hollingsworth. You've had your light on a little while.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually had it on to ask Ms Brand a question, but I think we're past question time now. So I will turn it off for now, but I may participate in debate later. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the next one was Councillor Franco and then Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to respond to and comment on the proposed amendment from Councillor Park. Firstly, the state naming policy guidelines already envisage the renaming and dual naming of existing locations. That is the case. The only thing we're doing in our policy, as it currently stands, is precluding something that is already in law, that's already envisaged, that is already commonplace practice. Secondly, in relation to the consultation and the need for consultation, that public consultation has already happened on this specific issue. We went out with the current draft as it is in relation to the naming of new places. The responses, and I think most of the submissions received, or quite a number of them, and comments that I've had and feedback that I've had, has all been about the need to amend the policy. This is in the submissions. We can read it in the public report, in the report that we've got before us. This was something that's been presented and we've been asked in relation to it. In relation to the way it's been addressed by officers, if you look at the comments in attachment 2 or attachment 1, wherever it is, where people are commenting on the potential renaming of existing sites, it says this will be attended to and addressed by way of the development of a policy. The only problem is the way that the existing draft motion was presented by council officers was in a way to preclude that very fact, the potential renaming or dual naming, etc., of existing places and spaces. So there's an error, if you like, minor error and deficiency in the report before us, but that consultation has taken place. We've had that feedback. We can, as councillors, now respond to that feedback and actually pass the amendment, the motion, as that reflects the community consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franco. Councillor Sinfield.
Thank you. We wonder why politicians and governments get a bad reputation as we debate unnecessary stuff like this when this is a perfectly good motion on the screen that seeks to achieve the same objectives, just in a much better way. The consultation has been done by officers. You're right, Councillor Franco, it has. And what we see here in policy and in the officer's recommendation is their impartial best advice to us. And I'm prepared to accept that without question. I have no doubt that the officers have done their best job at putting this together in the form that the community seeks for it to be in. So I don't seek to change it. I'm happy with the officer's advice. I welcome this amended wording by Councillor Park. And funnily enough, as we sit here in the city of Boroondara, an Indigenous word, we are one of few municipalities across Victoria who embraces it to that level. We name our municipality after an Indigenous word. I urge my colleagues to take the time now to consider this motion, because it's not evil. Take the time to read it and digest it and see whether it aligns with your values. It aligns with mine. Community consultation and seeing what our community would like us to do and achieve on their behalf is absolutely fine with me. Maybe not with all of you, if you just want to make a decision without consulting our community. The bicycle strategy we've discussed in recent times has caused many in our community to put blinkers on. It's excluded a portion of the community because they thought it related to bicycles, so they haven't provided their feedback. Now, many in the community may have reviewed this strategy document and opted not to provide feedback on new sites or renaming old sites because they were satisfied with the strategy in the form that it was presented to them. So to change that now is really wrong without going out to consult, and that's what point 3 seeks to achieve. I'm opposed to policy on the fly, as I've said before, and commend what is on the screen to you.
Thank you, Councillor Sinfield. Councillor Stavrou.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I must admit, I'm a little bit conflicted as this discussion is going on. I mean, I am a member of the Reconciliation Committee. I chaired it today, and I think extraordinary work has been done by officers, by elders, by the Indigenous community, by fellow members of the committee. And I think everybody involved is serious about doing the right thing. Where my conflict is arising is that when I look at the statement of commitment to reconciliation, one can read it one way, that council is committed, and that's a good way of reading it. The other thing to do is to think about that what council does is a gift to the democratic process by the community bestowed on us to represent them in that commitment. And therein lies my dilemma now, that the way that Councillor Park has drafted or requested a drafting, a sensible drafting, one might say too, to engage that community so that we can bring out what the community really thinks both ways, both sides of the debate. I'm sort of feel that we're on the horns of the dilemma that if 3 is true, then A feels weakened. And I'm going to say what I've just said, and hopefully in the next few minutes I'll have some way of coming down to which way to vote. But I think what I wanted was a much cleaner, unanimous support to indicate and show how committed we are, really committed we are to reconciliation, rather than, you know, allowing the perfect to come in the way of the good. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Stavrou. Councillor Thompson, I think, was first, and then Councillor Biggar.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'm going to start by firstly acknowledging the elders, Auntie Gail, Auntie Julianne, Uncle Colin, Charlie Woolmore from the council. We've been in consultation with them for well over 12 months. And obviously Glenn Loffrey, who we'll all know, has put an apology for this evening. We'll just acknowledge to the gallery that, you know, we're debating here about the good things about what we're doing towards reconciliation. Even though we've got a challenge of minds, we're actually still making good steps towards reconciliation. And I do acknowledge all of their contributions. That needs to be said because it seems to be a negative debate. What I will acknowledge is that we have been consulting, and Councillor Franco is correct that through the consultation on the draft strategy, we've got feedback with regards to new places versus places, and notwithstanding the intent may be the same in item 3, the original motion actually sort of formalise that to have the flexibility in place so that we can consider both new places and existing places at the same time. It's not saying that we will adopt new names for existing places, but that just gives us the flexibility. And that's something that was consulted with, and that's the feedback that we got not only from the community in the report, but also for the benefit of the councillors in today's committee. That's the feedback that we got from the elders today. And the same is said with the statement of commitment. You know, I guess we've got to, if we truly believe in reconciliation, we should have no concerns whatsoever about a statement of a reconciliation or commitment to reconciliation. First and foremost, you know, if you don't believe in that, don't vote for the reconciliation strategy. That's what I'd say. I support, I understand the good intentions of Councillor Park with this one. I don't think we need to consult on something that we've already consulted. And I will support the original motion of Councillor Biggar. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Biggar, then Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, Councillor Thompson said much of what I wanted to say very well, so I don't need to say much. I also appreciate his returning this to the fact that this is a positive and an important day, and I think we around this table are agreeing in 96% of what we're talking about, so that is an important thing to say. I don't see my amendment as in any way a significant change in direction. I think it's been somewhat misrepresented by that. I think I would agree with Councillor Stavrou on point 1 that the changing of the title is a weakening. It is not what the... Oh, am I misrepresenting you? Sorry. Okay. I'll take that back. I will say my comment to the first point is that I don't see that as a representation of what the Wurundjeri elders were looking for. I think all that they're asking for, as Councillor Thompson mentioned, is sort of a statement of commitment, which is already effectively a reinforcement of what we're doing. So I don't see it as a significant change in direction in any way. I think that, and as Councillor Thompson has said, we have consulted on this. This is not about the consultation. And this is also, when it comes to the naming, it's about developing a policy about it. It's not about taking decisions out of people's hands. So I would encourage I'm not going to vote to support Councillor Park's amendment, and I encourage my fellow councillors to follow me.
Thank you, Councillor Biggar. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I won't be able to support Councillor Park's proposed amendment. I will be leaning towards Councillor Biggar's proposal. But I just wanted to clarify a few points and pick up some comments that have been made around the room. I actually had words similar to Councillor Sinfield, the fact that we do celebrate being called City of Boroondara. But as we know, City of Boroondara was derived through change, because where we're sitting now was the City of Camberwell, and in unison with City of Hawthorn and City of Kew. It was then amalgamated and became City of Boroondara. So we do evolve, and from time to time change is not only necessary, it's actually desirable. In saying that, I'm not proposing for 1 minute that there's going to be a flood of applications for change of name, but I think Councillor Franco was correct to pick up that the word only new was there that could potentially prohibit any existing names to even be considered for change in the future, or as was discussed with the Freeway Golf Course, that it actually may not even have a formal name. So if there is an opportunity there to consider that, we would hate to think it could be precluded because of the language. The other comment is also being involved with the Reconciliation Advisory Committee, and had the privilege to work with officers and councillors and elders on the committee. This issue was only realised today, and it was around 3 o'clock this afternoon, and it wasn't until 4 or 5 o'clock that there was even an opportunity for officers in conjunction with committee to try and put together some words. So it certainly wasn't orchestrated, or certainly not intended to be an ambush, and it wasn't intended to drag into debate. It was intended to try and put forward representation that reflects the language of the elders. And I think a lot of the language we use is strategy-based and strategic-based, and we refer to visions and missions and values. Whereas the elders said to us they prefer to use the language statement of commitment. That actually is more powerful and more significant to them. The actual content of the document I don't believe is intended to change much at all, in fact quite little. It's just putting it into language that they're more comfortable with, and I'm happy to support that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hollingsworth. So I'll return to the mover, Councillor Park, to wrap up.
Well, we received very clear advice from officers that there had not been consultation about renaming existing places. So that's point one. So those of you who are saying that that has occurred, then that's clearly at odds with officer advice. The motion the amended motion is one that seeks to extend goodwill and actually put into place what was being sought, but with the important element of public consultation, true public consultation. And I'm so sick to death of hearing from people who come to this place and talk about the need for transparency and then do their damnedest to ensure that there isn't transparency. And it beggars belief when Councillor Hollingsworth says that this only emerged at 3 or 4 o'clock. Well, if it's something you've been consulting on all this time, how does it suddenly tumble out at the 11th hour? I think it's very unfortunate that this approach has been taken, and this should be a motion that has unanimous support, and it could have been a motion that had unanimous support. But instead, an hour before the meeting, there's a fundamental change in direction. And the important missing element is public consultation. None of the new councillors have been involved in the naming of any council place, but the last council went through it with the Greythorn Community Hub, and there was significant consultation, feedback, input, interest, ownership by the local community. So do we just go in and call it something entirely different on a whim? Aren't those residents entitled to give us the gift of feedback? And we hear about, oh, well, we're not just going to go and do this, that and something else. Well, who knows? These things tend to be incremental. I wouldn't be surprised that all sorts of things are added to a list. Maybe the list already exists. But there needs to be public consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? So that has failed.
I call a
Those
division.
Against? Oh, sorry. Okay, so I'll put the motion again. Those in favour? So it's Councillor Park, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Addis. And those against? Councillor Galt, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Bigger and Councillor Franco.
Madam Mayor, where is your vote?
My vote, I thought I said against, yes. For, I'm sorry, in favour of, yes. So I'm now seeking another motion. That motion has failed. Councillor Bigger.
I would like to return to the motion that I proposed originally.
Okay, so we'll get that up. So that's your motion. So I'm seeking a seconder for the motion. Councillor Thompson, you seconded it last time?
Yes, I think we'll return to debate.
Okay,
Madam Mayor.
you. So we'll, would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor Bigger?
Briefly, because I think I already have, just to say that I believe that this motion takes into consideration the feedback, the late feedback that we've had from the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people about adding a single action point to the implementation plan, which is what this is about, point A, and point B, which is about keeping open the option of naming both new places and potentially renaming existing ones. So I believe it's about developing a policy, and I think I've probably said enough for this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just let me check for a minute. Thank you, councillor. So I've been advised that we don't need to hear further from those who have already spoken, excuse me, to the motion, but whether there are any others who wish to speak, excuse me, to the motion. I can't see any lights on, so councillor Thompson, I think you've already spoken to.
No, I reserved my right in the previous debate. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Doesn't seem to be any other lights on. So, look, I'm just going to take this opportunity again to thank the elders for the journey that they've been on over the last probably 15 months. Started when I was mayor last year, and the tireless effort of our council officers and staff who've been attending monthly meetings with various departments, working with the elders on all different strategies, embedding reconciliation into the organisation, which is by virtue of what that is exactly our taking our steps towards reconciliation as well. This strategy is a very good strategy. It sets out a clear path. When you read through the papers in detail, it has the implementation over the next 4 years. And I think it is something that, whilst there's been debate by colleagues on this, I'd hope that everyone does support this for the benefits of what this will actually do towards reconciliation. I'm not going to debate further any of that, but I would like to again thank everyone who's partaken and the chairs, respective chairs of the committee. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, and I'll return to councillor Biggar to close the debate. Sorry.
I'm happy to close it with councillor Thompson's comments and ask my fellow councillors to support this important piece of work put forward tonight.
So I'll now put the motion. Those in favour of the motion on the screen. Are those against?
I call a division.
Thank you. So those in favour of the motion on the screen, that's Councillor Gold, Councillor Hollingsworth, Councillor Gillies, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Biggar and Councillor Franco. And those against, that is Councillor Park, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Addis. So that motion is...
Sorry, I'm not against, I'm for the motion.
For. Thank you. Councillor... Okay, so I'll just put those against, which is Councillor Park, Councillor Watson, Councillor Stavrou, Councillor Sinfield and Councillor Addis. Thank you. So that motion is carried. Thank you.